All right. Welcome to this meeting where we're going to work on program 5. Let me share my screen. All right, so I downloaded, I'm already here on program 5, and I downloaded the instructions and the template. So let's get started by taking a look at the instructions. In this program, you should be very familiar with program 4 before doing this program because you're going to use two of the functions from program 4, the display balance function and the deposit money function. This program is not the most practical way to do this, but it's just a way to practice doing input and output files, input and output from the same file. It's also a good way to practice more with conditions and a loop. So we're just practicing and learning things, and we will be adding more features to our bank when we get to program 6. So we will be doing the bank for program 4, 5, and 6. 6 is going to be after your first exam because we're going to start to learn about input-output parameters. So you should really understand how to do 4, how to do 5 before working on program 6. So what you're going to do is you're going to have a checking balance and a savings balance, just like we did in program 4. And then we're going to create a file, and we're going to put those two balances in the file. Then after we put those two balances in the file, we're going to connect to that same file and read those balances from the file. Now, I understand that your program already knows what those values are, but this is just an exercise to demonstrate how you can create a file and then read from the file. Then you're going to allow the user to make deposits into either one of the accounts. And then at the end, you're going to save the new balances in the file. So I've given you a template, and I recommend that you use the template in order to do this. And I will demonstrate that in just a minute. If you take a look at the some more things about this, we're changing our menu options. We're not going to have a 1 through 6. We have a D to deposit or a Q to quit. Then after the user selects a D, this is practice using upper and lowercase and characters. After the user selects D to deposit, they will have to select a 1 for checking or a 2 for savings. So this is different than what we did before. We don't have a big long menu. You just have one menu with two options, D to deposit, Q or quit, and then 1 for checking and 2 for savings. So you can only deposit in this program on purpose because the focus of this program is just getting a little bit of introduction into file processing. All right, so here's the sample output. We have our balance. You can display your balance just like you did in program 4. Enter a D, enter 1 for savings. You just keep adding money to the account. Enter D, enter 1 for checking, 2 for savings. And again, you can make your interaction with the user much nicer than this, so it's easier to understand what's going on. I like you to put your own personality in your prompts and stuff. And then you continue to deposit money until you're done, and eventually the user will hit Q and the program will end. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to launch Visual Studio. Actually, I'm going to show you also that you can do it in the online compiler. So if you go here on Google and you type in online C compiler, you could work on this in an online compiler. I have not had a chance to try it out on a Mac yet. So if anyone wants to tell me what happens when they put the template in the Mac, I would be interested to know. So let's first put the template in the online compiler. So all I did here is I downloaded this, I downloaded the template here. This is the code. This is the incomplete code to help you get started. So I downloaded the incomplete code, and I can put it here in the online compiler. And when I build it and run it, you're going to see here that it created an extra file because right here, I have this, I'm going to do it in Visual Studio in a minute, but right here, this statement right here creates a file. So what actually happens here is it creates the file, then I read the numbers from the file, and then at the end, I put the new numbers into the file. So if you take a look at it, it creates the file with the numbers, And then we haven't added any deposits, so it just has the same numbers. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have, if you wanted to be more practical, you would replace the numbers, but that's the purpose of this assignment, is just to practice with some files and go in and navigate and find your file and practice making a file and reading from a file and writing to a file. All right, so this works in the online compiler. So then all you need to do is add your features and all of that here, and you can do it in the online compiler. You can also use Visual Studio, which is the way that I'm going to do it. So I'm going to launch Visual Studio. I'm going to create a new project. I will call this project, I'm going to call it Program 5 Video. Create. Project, add new item. Sorgente, program 5.c. Add it. And now I have my project in Visual Studio. I have my Solution Explorer here, and I'm going to copy and paste the code into Visual Studio. So now let's just go through the code a little bit, and then we will test it, and then we will add some of the features. So you're going to have be sure to put your name, date, and a brief description. A brief description includes, a bank deposit app that uses file processing or something like that, not just Program 5. That is not a description of what the program does. We have our preprocessor directives for Visual Studio. We have stdio.h for printf and scanf. This also includes fopen, fprintf, fscanf, and fclose. These are functions that we're going to use for file processing. We have a greeting function, we have a display balance function, we have a deposit money function. And you will note that these two functions are exactly the same as your program 4. So if you did your display balance and your deposit money functions properly in program 4, all you need to do for that then would be to open up your program 4 code. Hopefully I have my program 4 code. I can open up my program 4 code. Let's see. Oh, maybe I don't have program 4 code. Hopefully I have program 5 code. Yes, I have my program 5 code, which has my deposit money function and my display balance function and my greeting function. So if you got them correct in your program 4 and they work as expected, you don't need to re-implement the greeting function, the display balance function, or the deposit money function for this program. You can just take those exact functions from program 4. You might want to update your greeting that says that only allows deposits, just to make it more thorough. But your display balance function should work the same, and your deposit money function should work the same. So there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We're reusing those functions, all of these functions, for this assignment. Be sure to put your function prototypes above main and your function definitions below main. Now I'm going to build and test. So the program builds. When I run it, all it does is create a file so far, because I have to add the code for the selections. But let's take a look. If I navigate here in my folders, I went to I have this class, I have my programs, and I have this folder, Program 5 Video. And if that's the directory of my project, and if I go in there, you will see that it has created a file called balances input. And it has the balance, the original balance, and then it has the updated balance in there. Obviously, the balances have not been updated, so it hasn't done anything yet. So again, it's not that practical because I already know what the values are. It's just practice, creating the file, and then you read the values. Now look, before I do anything, let's just update what the values are. Let's just add, oh, I don't know. Let's add $1,000 to the checking account, and let's add $10 to the savings account. So this should have an 10,000 extra dollars. I said 1,000, do 1,000. So this should have an extra $1,000 in it, and this should have an extra $10 in it. So let's build it. And each time it executes, it's going to recreate the file because that's what we're doing right here. We're reconnecting. And now we'll run it. You have to run it to make the changes. And if I navigate back here into the folder and I open up that balances input file, you will see it has the initial balances and then it has the balances that have the update. Now, before doing this assignment, you should really go on to Canvas, and in the module section here, they're in module, I think it's in, I'm not sure if it's in module 3 or module 4. It's probably module 4. Let's go back. In module 4. In module 4, there is a video here on file processing. So I'm going to add this to the assignment because I recommend that you watch this video on file processing before working on this assignment. All right, let's get back to our assignment and go through what's going on here. So that we're not going to do that because we're going to actually implement the code, but let's talk about files first. So when you're dealing with files, there are 3 steps when dealing with files. Number 1 is declare the file pointer. Number 2 is use the file. Oops, number 2 is connect to the file. Connect using fopen. And then 3 is use the file using fscanf if you're reading from a file, and you use fprintf if you are writing to a file. And then the 4th thing is to close the file. So the first thing you do is you declare your file pointers. So this name InPointer is just a name I made up. For all I care, this could be potato. It wouldn't work in this program because I've already used InPointer, but this is just a variable name. We have 3 data types, int, double char, and now we have a 4th data type called file pointer. It must be all capital letters. That is the requirement for whoever wrote this language. All right, so you declare your file pointer. Then when you're going to connect, there's 2 ways you can connect. You can connect to write to the file, and you can connect to read from the file. So if you decide to connect to write to the file, if this file exists, then it will find that file, erase everything in that file, and start from scratch. In this class, we are going to use a separate pointer to read from a file and a separate pointer to write to a file. There's no, you're not going to read and write with the same pointer. You can read and write to the same file, but you're not going to read and write with the same pointer. All right, so writing means I want to put stuff into the file, so therefore I use fprintf. Reading means I want to read data from the file, so therefore I use fscanf. If this file does not exist, so for example, if I were to change this name and rebuild this, so if I go into my folder, I have in my folder a file called balances input, but now when I run this, it has now created a file called balances input 1. Because that file didn't exist, it then created a new file called balances input 1. And then it puts these values into the file. Okay, now that's fine. So if the file exists, it's going to delete everything in it and start from scratch. If the file does not exist, it's going to create it. When you're reading from a file, that file must exist. So say, for example, I called this file balances. There is no file called balances. So when I build this, my program should crash. So my program crashed here, and my program did not crash and say to me, hey, I tried to find a file called balances and it does not exist. That's not what happened. That is, I mean, that's what happened, but that's not what it tells you in the in this error here. This error is just telling you that your program crashed because it couldn't find the file. It just doesn't explicitly say that, but this is what the error looks like if you try to connect to a file for reading and that file does not exist. So you have to make sure that this is that you spell this exactly right. Now, if you're using a Windows and Visual Studio, that's why I have this. It will create the file in the same directory as the source code, and it will find the file in the same directory as the source code. If you're using a Mac, you might have to put a path here, like C, whatever, you know, users, whatever the path is. And to find that path in Windows, you just go to it and go to the file. And to find the path for this, you go to properties, and the path where this is located is C users desktop, blah, 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 blah. That's the whole path. The nice thing about Visual Studio is that you don't have to do that if you put the source code in the same, if you put the file in the same directory as your source code, it will find it. So I'm not really sure what will happen on a MacBook if you use this template. And if someone wants to let me know, I would be happy to hear from you. So I'm going to continue now. So you have this, you put the balances in the file, then you reconnect and read those balances from the file. Again, it's an exercise. Here you're going to put your greeting function. And then here is where we're going to have our code to allow you to do deposits and or just deposits. That's right, deposits or quit. All right, so the first thing you need to do is you need to get the selection. So I'm going to have to declare another variable here, char selection. In a future program, I might put this into a file, into a function, but for this one, I just decided to, you just printf, select, oops, just say enter D or Q. You should put a much better prompt than this. Then you scanf your D or your Q. Remember to put the space. This is also the initialization for the while loop. So your while loop test is going to be while selection does not equal Q and selection does not equal Q. If you can't wrap your head around this logical and, it's very common. My suggestion to you would be to use the toUpper function. You can add pound include ctype.h, and And then you could, after you get your selection, you could say selection equals to upper selection, right? So you get your selection, you change it to uppercase, and then your test doesn't have to be so complicated. It could just be while selection does not equal Q. It's the same thing that we did about not equal -1, but now we're just not equal Q. Then if it's a D, then you're going to get the account. If it's a 1, you'll deposit to checking. If it's a 2, you'll deposit to savings. And then you need to get another selection, which is the update for the while loop. And that would be the end of the while loop. So you get your selection, you change it to uppercase, you make sure that it's not a Q. If it's a Q, the loop will stop, just like if it was a -1, the loop would stop. You get your next selection, change it to uppercase, and don't forget to do the update. So let's test to make sure that that works. So if I enter D, D, W, the nice thing, then I entered Q. The nice thing about using characters is even if you enter a number can be a character, so you have less chance of having, any kind of issues with accidentally hitting a character when you want to have an integer or something like that. So that's why it's the menus with a character. I like to have that. And in future assignments, we will be adding the other features. We will be adding withdraw and all of that. But for right now, I just want you to focus on understanding. I always spell function wrong. Understanding how to create a file, how to access and connect to that file, do some practice with some conditions here, a practice with a while loop, and then put your new balance into the file. And be sure to navigate to your project and take a look at your file here. We don't need this one anymore. So take a look at your file and see what happens and that it's working as expected.